This one I'm especially nervous about because Blue Farm is something that's like widely known. So welcome to the MoxStars podcast. I am one of your hosts, Menace, and I'm here with Flash.
Zoom zoom.
He's here in all of his flashy glory. What is going on, dude?
Nothing, man. I'm just ready to talk about Dr. Pepper and Magic the Gathering.
Hey, we're in the right spot because this is the #1 podcast on the internet for both of those things, Magic the Gathering and Dr. Pepper. I reached out, so update on the Instagram response by Dr. Pepper and me making jorts with my cat. I reached out about the sponsorship and I got no response. We're still waiting to hear from them 10 days past that moment. So,
I mean, Dr. Pepper is busy with patients.
They're very busy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got to process those Medicare reimbursements, stuff like that. You know what? I don't love the bit where Dr. Pepper's a real doctor. It's not worth it.
Well, they are now the #2 soda in the country or in the world. What was that? They surpassed Pepsi. And now Dr. Pepper is rising in glory. You can see that if it continues on this trajectory, it will meet the popularity of Coca-Cola by let's say 2050, But
we'll be living on the moon, and Dr. Pepper will be the #1 beverage of the Mars colony.
And with our help. So Dr. Pepper, if you're listening to this, we're here for you. So
yeah. Oh, I thought you meant we were going to help colonize Mars.
That is possible.
Possible.
We don't know where we're going to be in that time. Like 2030.
2050 is a long way away.
Yeah, 2030. This could be the #1 podcast for just Magic the Gathering, and that comes to you, our dear listeners, to like, subscribe, ring that bell for more notifications, find us on YouTube, find us on all major podcasting platforms, and share with all of your buddies the MoxStars podcast. I've been going out and I've been actually talking to the people on the street, getting this podcast out there.
Man of the people. Menace, man of the people.
That's me, baby, in the flesh. What are we talking about today? Oh,
talking about our tokens.
That's
our
right.
Shiny new tokens.
Yes, we are. We have our new tokens available. I've got Flash's set right here in my hands. Once I revealed these, you can actually find the creator of these, Death Milk Designs, on Instagram. He's been giving us shout outs. Since I got a pair of tokens or a set of tokens in his hands, he's been taking tons of photos and posting them on his story and stuff like that. So the word is getting out. If you would like a set of these tokens, you can also find us on Instagram to get a closer look at these, and DM me, or you can join our Discord server and reach out to me there as well. We're doing 10 for a set, and if you are a patron, which if you'd like to support us directly, you can become an official Pepperhead. And you get a set of tokens for the cost of shipping. You can also become a Cherry Vanilla Pepperhead for $5 a month, like UWP Court, Will Rule, and K Mr. K. And same deal, you get a set of tokens for just the cost of shipping, which I think came out to be about $3.50 when I look back on it. So pretty reasonable to get the sweetest, best tokens in the biz.
These are kind of like the premier tokens in the game right now.
Yeah. As via testimony by Tordeth. So you're going to want to get these tokens. And you can get any amount of sets. You can get multiple sets, and we can figure that out.
If you're playing a deck that, I don't know, sometimes pops off and you get 2 treasures on the board, you're going to want 2 sets of these tokens. Yes. Just in case you get in a situation where for some reason you have 2 treasures on the board.
Yeah, or if you're creating copies of things, which happens multiple times a game in today's Magic the Gathering world, you're going to want multiple copies. And, we have the sickest copy token on the planet. So, ooh, this thing's hot. All right. Today, we are going to be breaking down Blue Farm. Now, this is probably the most well-known. If you were to ask other cEDH players who don't play Blue Farm, this is probably the most overrated deck. You know, like if you've watched Mental Misplay and stuff like that.
By the way, before we go too far, for people who don't know, Blue Farm is Tim the Crom.
Yes. And we'll break down the commanders. We'll break down some of the cards today, and we'll break down. We have 5 lists sitting here waiting. We're going to go through each one, not in excruciating detail, but just some of the like the minor nuances between each that sort of like makes them unique. And we have one of these lists that is just absolutely off the wall. A lot of Blue Farm lists are, well, this is a deck that has been what people will say is figured out. Like, a lot of the lists are very consistent because this is a deck that has been proven to succeed. This is a deck that has the highest number of conversions on EDH Top 16. So that's why we figured it was a good place to start. Talk about doing like commander breakdowns, cEDH deck list breakdowns. So before that, there was something that happened this past week that I'm sure all cEDH players and all Magic players of all kinds was very excited about. Modern Horizons 3 has landed on the scene, and I went to a pre-release this past weekend and got my ass kicked. But
so you're talking about in terms of what you opened or games or both?
A little bit of both. So I guess the thing with these premiere sets is that there are a lot of chase cards that are incredibly valuable. Ugin's Labyrinth, Emrakul, Ulamog, stuff like that, right? That are like $60+ per, you know, and there's a lot of cards in here that are like $20 plus or more, $30 if you're looking at some of the flares. So the thing about it was that I opened my box, and this was a bad omen, but my pre-release foil was the Argent Die, which on the Wizards of the Coast Instagram page, they ask pro players all the time, what is, you know, this card, how do you think it will perform in sealed? And this is the only card in the entire set that got a 0 out of 5. And they said it is just awful. It has no utility, no purpose, and it helps your opponent draw cards. So, say hello to my pre-release foil, absolute piece of trash. And then I opened the rest of my packs, and the only thing that I got of any value was Harrogast, and I didn't even play it. It wasn't even in red. I played Abzan +1/+1 counters, and the deck like seemed like it had legs, but it was just too slow compared to everything else that was built. Even Eldrazi were coming down at like an alarming rate. It was way faster than I thought it ever was going to be. But, you know, like there are a lot of cards that spawn, well, Eldrazi spawn, create Eldrazi spawn tokens. Like there's this common, it's 2, a red and a green, that when it enters the battlefield, you create 2 Eldrazi spawn. It's a 2/3, and then whenever you sacrifice an Eldrazi, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. So immediately you can sack those 2 or save them for a turn and boost, but basically you can boost this thing to a 4/5 inherently just for 4 mana, and you ramp yourself along the way. It's a crazy common. I saw it a ton, and it absolutely kicked me and stomped my face into the dirt. So. Yeah, I wasn't the luckiest guy. There were people who I got I didn't get Ulamogged, but I got Emrakul twice, and
that feels bad. I bet.
Yeah,
be on the receiving end.
You know, there was one point where the opponent I was playing against was like, weird that this Emrakul doesn't have flying, and I was like, that's weird because I thought it totally does. And he goes, oh, yeah, here it is. Hidden in the wall of text is flying. And I was like, yeah, you're right. There are 400 words on that card. Like, there is so much text on Emrakul that it's like, it's hard to see.
So much text and all of it messes your day up if you're on the opposing battlefield.
Yes. Because it steals your entire battlefield and then punches you really, really hard. So, really great stuff. Really great time. Actually, I got to meet a lot of new players, and hopefully they're out there listening now. And just know that I did still have a good time, even though my box was maybe worth $20, and I spent $60 to play. So.
Oh, that's how much a MH3 pre-release costs? $60?
Yeah. I think that's something Yes. The world has been complaining about how expensive this set is, and when you hear that, you're like, "Oh, I get it now." It's like $60 for this pre-release was like I was paying for an experience.
Yeah, I mean, like the pre-release thing. Like, what's a regular pre-release cost? 30?
Yeah, it's usually 30 or 35.
Oh man, jack it up another $10 because it's a special set or whatever. But like, pre-release is meant to be a loss leader promotional thing for your product, not like, you know, get as much cash as you can. Not like, can there be aspects of the like? Listen, if you listen to enough episodes of this podcast, you know that we're raging against the machine in terms of like cynical cash grabs. Like, let some part of this game not be a cynical cash grab.
Yeah, it's a little ironic because we're also shilling for a hella cash. So if you're watching this, Wizards of the Coast, sponsor us. Woo!
Yeah, but the duality of podcasting. Right. But like, yeah, I don't know. It just, that feels bad. Just on a visceral level, that feels bad.
Yeah.
So, like, to go, man.
Because, like, you're sitting there. Well, like, yeah, you go to all these different pre-release events, $35. And here's the thing, is this was the cheapest one I could find, and it was at Mox Boarding House. Every other place was $65 or more. So, like, I wonder.
Like, you're paying $60 for the opportunity to maybe open nothing of value, no cool cards, and then play with those cards and maybe lose all night and have a bad time.
That was exactly what happened to me, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, man.
So, like, and here's the thing is the play boosters, like, and this is where we can actually, I want to be able to draw some data from it, but there was a guy sitting kitty corner from me and like during the deck building process, and I was like, man, I really got shit on with these packs. Like, I'm 5 packs in, I'm about to open my last pack, and I have 5 rares, not including my pre-release. So I got 1 rare in every pack. And he goes, I've opened 4 and I have 14 rares. And I'm like, what? And then I opened my final pack and it had 4 rares in it. And I was just like, oh, so this makes up for it, right? You know, like, but my deck, my box was inherently like stacked against me, like right out the gate. And that's like what the chances of play boosters and everything that, like, yes, they want to sell more packs, but this is the problem, is like when you go to sealed now, like I experienced it. I was on the receiving end of that shit box that, like, I had 9 rares and a person who's 4 packs in had 14. So, like, that person, I think I saw them sitting at the top table pretty much the whole night, which, yeah, good on you. Great boxes you pulled. So, I had a good time. I had a great time. I'm doing the font.
Yeah, those are the words of a man who had a great time.
Hey. So, all right. Enough self-deprecating talk or self-loathing from my experience at the Modern Horizons 3 pre-release. The cards, the set, still super cool. The commons and uncommons, the way they interact with all these other things, really great. Loved that aspect of it. I think that's when you can tell a set is strong, is when the commons shine, like oftentimes more than the rare. So, yeah. Let's move on. Let's get into our main subject for the day. We are talking about Blue Farm. And Flash, you said earlier, this is a combination of commanders called Crom, Ludovic's Opus, and Timna the Weaver. Do you have those up on your screen right now?
Yeah. Timna the Weaver, colorless, 1 black, 1 white, legendary creature, human cleric, 2/2, with lifelink. At the beginning of your post-combat main phase, you may pay X life, where X is the number of opponents that were dealt combat damage this turn. If you do, draw X cards. It has partner. You're partnering with Crom in this deck 100% of the time. 3 colorless, blue, red, legendary creature, zombie horror. 4/4 flying haste. Whenever an opponent casts his or her second spell each turn, draw a card. And so what you end up with is every color except for green and 2 creatures in the command zone that are very easy to proc card draw engines.
Yeah, absolutely built to just, farm cards. I'm not sure if that's exactly what the name means, but these commanders just seem to rake in the card draw. Mostly because, they work really well with one another. And I think that's where Crom having flying and haste in tandem with Timna's ability makes for a really deadly duo. The deck has been proven time and time again. We are drawing all of our data off of EDH Top 16, which is a program called Command Tower. And the thing is that a lot of tournaments around the country are using this. There are also a lot of tournaments that are using alternate software. So that's data that we'll be missing out on. But you can see here that Blue Farm is the #1 deck in the country with 180 top 16 conversions out of 725 entries. The conversion is about 25%, but here's the thing that the reason why it's so interesting is that it has over twice as many top 16s as the #2 deck. And it has about, double the number of entries. So we're seeing a similar conversion like in the #2 deck, which is to say Weatherlight Captain. But this is a deck that is so consistent and so proven and so well known that pretty much every time, whenever someone comes into the game, like, what deck should I play? I've heard it time and time again, just play Blue Farm. It's the strongest deck. It's the best deck in the format. And as we can see here, it's not necessarily the best deck in the format. It doesn't have the highest conversion rate amongst all decks. It has a very high conversion rate, but the reason that it is considered the best is, yes, it has so much card draw, but there are so many skilled pilots out there who are taking this to the top. So we drew a few of the deck lists we've talked about through the course of time. What I did was I filtered through tournament results. So EDH Top 16 started recording tournament entry data in I think it was August of 2022. So almost 2 years ago. And so I went and I found the first tournament that had ever happened, which I think was the Fish Bowl, the first one, and took that, the first one there. It got Blue Farm placed 3rd, and went for that, took that deck list, and then we just moved forward so we could see kind of where, the deck list, how it has evolved over time. You can, there's a pretty hard line drawn in the sand when Wild's Veil Drain came out, and you'll notice that. But yeah, we're basically going to start. We're not going to be able to go exactly 2 years back, but we're going to be able to go a year back at least, and kind of see the way the deck has evolved over the course of the last 12 months. So let's get right into it. First, we have a deck called Sans Green Table Police by Offensive Wombat. And this deck last updated a little over a year ago. Timna and Crom at the helm. And I think that what we're going to notice over the course of reviewing these 5 lists is that The creatures are refined, like to a point that, like you can see what is effective and what is not. And this one has 11 creatures, 12 sorceries, 29 instants, where the deck shines, 14 artifacts, and 4 enchantments. Most of these decks do run between 26 and 29 lands. I think the rule of thumb, the rule of deck building with Blue Farm is that if you want to run Mox Diamond, you have to run at least 28 lands. So this one's right on it. They got Diamond in the list. It just goes for consistency's sake, so you're not just like sitting there, land, Diamond, and then you sit and you're not looking for, your next source of mana for the next 4 turns or struggling through the rest of the game. So let's get started. The creatures, we're looking at some very consistent things. Like here, I think we can tell that Ragavan and Dockside are in every single list. And since the deck includes white, it also includes Drannith. Every single list is like this. Now, the one card that's of interest here in the mono green or mono green Sands Green Table Police is that this list has a Grim Hireling,
which I think is a card that is still good, but has since been outclassed, and we see it kind of disappear from future lists.
Yeah, this card is a ceiling card, I would say. Yeah, you're trying to hit that ceiling of 6 treasures getting like generated off of this. Most Blue Farm lists are inherently designed to fire off an Adnaz as soon as possible to basically see as many cards and get into whatever combo like you have chosen. So this list includes Thassa's Oracle. The idea is a Demonic Consultation, a Tainted Pact, a Underworld Breach combo line. And that's the thing about Blue Farm, is that since it includes everything but green, they aren't really pursuing many creature combo lines. So see as many cards as possible, get into as many things as possible, as much free mana as possible, so that you can fire off an Adnaz that will help you see even more cards, and then fire off this Underworld Breach or Demonic Consultation, Thassa's Oracle. The combos are very low to the ground.
Yeah, and also, by the way, speaking of seeing cards, like one thing that is super underrated is that having access to white, you get Esper Sentinel, and then you have that additional redundancy with your like Mystic Grimoires and things like that, where it's just like you're almost guaranteed to see one of those cards in your opening hand, or you can like, mulligan towards it.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of Blue Farm pilots will mulligan until they see one of these 1 mana card draw engines pop up in their normal or in their hands. So you either see a turn 1 Timna or a turn 1 card draw engine, or even to the ceiling of saying like you can turn 1 Crom, and like that is worth the investment when you go into it, just because other players, and if someone forces a Crom on turn 1, like, geez, like, yeah, you did just like blow your load trying to get Crom out there, but that's an irresponsible opponent. Just let him have the card draw, or like remove it at a later point. It's just Crom does provide you with that engine where most players are definitely casting, like multiple spells in the early turns of the game. That's going to help you reload your hand.
Yep.
So, one of the cards,
and we see that too down the line. Not to get too far ahead of us.
Yeah.
But you see the inclusion of Lotho and stuff like that. That's like, you're just so many value effects, and the redundancy of these value effects where you're just generating card draw or tokens or something like that, just even unintentionally, just whatever you're doing is generating advantages.
Yeah, I think that's one of the best ways to break this mid-range hell that we've like sort of entered, that a lot of players want to achieve and get to, is by generating value off of things that they're just doing, right? So that's why I really like Trouble in Pairs. That's why, like you said, Lotho is amazing. And it's surprising that this list, even though it is running, well, actually, this list looks like it's prior to the One Ring. So, so this is before this is before Lord of the Rings hit. So, this might actually lend some insight into how the deck has evolved over the past year. Is like, man, Lotho changed this deck. Like, once it dropped, it helped this deck so much by generating like the colors and mana that you need. It helps you get ahead so much more. Do you have Lotho up in front of you?
Yeah.
Do you want to read it off for me?
Whenever a player casts their second spell each turn, you lose 1 life and create a treasure token.
God. And that is so good. It's like,
and then, after that, like, I'm looking down again, getting ahead of ourselves. I'm looking at the Ian Flannery's list, and he's got Archivist of Ogma. He's got Talion, which is again things you're doing, just generating additional value.
Yeah, and if you guys are unfamiliar, we're gonna be Ian Flannery is comedian. We'll be talking about one of his lists once we get down the line. One of the cards that is present in this list, so in older versions of Blue Farm, that still makes the cut to this day, is Savine's Reclamation. Rudy, you want to fire that one off for us?
Are they? Give me a second. Are they on the intuition line with that?
They are. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So Savine's Reclamation, 2 colorless, 1 white, sorcery. Return target permanent card with CMC 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. If the spell was cast from graveyard, it has flashback, 4 colorless, 1 white. You may copy this spell and choose a new target for the copy.
Yeah, so this is a pile with intuition, like you were saying, that has helped the deck like persevere over time. It's one of those like stacks that is impossible. Like, it doesn't matter what choice you make, and the combination of those things are Underworld Breach, Savine's Reclamation, and Lion's Eye Diamond. So if you give them the Underworld Breach, great, they just cast it and they go through their loops with Lion's Eye Diamond. Like, great. If you choose Lion's Eye Diamond, you've now likely given them the mana to just flashback Savine's Reclamation, getting the Lion's Eye Diamond and the Underworld Breach to the battlefield. And if you choose the Savine's Rec, you're just giving them the Underworld Breach, since the other 2 cards from Intuition go to the graveyard. It's one of the strongest lines and one of the strongest Intuition piles that one can assemble. So this is what has helped Blue Farm see so much success over the course of time.
I mean, but the other thing too with that is that, like, Blue Farm includes all of these different combos and things that don't dilute card quality. They work as the win con combos, and they work as just cards off the top deck.
Right. And this deck is like getting better with time, and as we move forward, like, this is like something where you can play Deflecting Swat because you are going to be controlling Tymna a majority of the game. Like, a lot of the creature composition for these decks are like based in the idea that you're going to be able to get through. So some creatures have evasion, like Fairy Mastermind here, or are just big enough to get through. So,
or there's some lists that include Delny, which makes a lot of your stuff unblockable.
Yep.
Essentially.
Yeah. And gives you multiple Tymna triggers, so you can draw potentially 6 off of that, which is kind of insane.
I mean, the math on the card draw on this deck is crazy.
Right.
Like, if you want to do pure Candyland, like, what can you get in a turn cycle? Like, I think it's over 20 cards somehow. Like, if you have both your commanders on board, right?
Yeah, that's crazy. So, yes, this list, it just gives us a good starting point, right? You can just sort of like see how the deck is evolving as we go on to our next list. This one includes Peer into the Abyss, which I think it's the only list. This is when Peer into the Abyss gets flexed out, and we're not going to see it anymore. So going into the next list, we have TK Deluxe's Cabal Vroom. This one, you're starting to see Lotho. You're starting to see Orcish Bowmasters. You're starting to see the One Ring. Like, these are now auto includes into this list. It's just those cards are like upon arrival have made such a massive dent into the cEDH format. So, and especially here, it just helps with the deck's consistency and getting through. It helps them mid-range better. It helps them just sort of just, keep the wheels turning. Yeah, go ahead.
And honestly, I don't see many other changes here between the list. Like, it's really those two cards, Lotho and Orcish Bowmasters. And this list doesn't have One Ring, but later on we'll see it. This list does have the One Ring.
It does, yep.
Yeah, so just, Lord of the Rings dropped, and just like all the good cards from that, the 3 best cards from that set went in this deck.
Yeah, and I think that's when, like, this list includes Damn, which is...
I think that's a great card.
Yeah, it's one of the only board wipes that I think a deck like this would consider, because it does mean that you sacrifice your board. But this is when, like, about a year ago is when we started seeing this transition into, like, the mid-range. And this person was very much ahead of the curve, and like loading up, like, it is single target removal, but having that board wipe stapled to it is just the acknowledgement of saying, yes, creature based snowball decks are becoming a challenge. Like, they're becoming harder and harder to deal with, and they're on the rise. So including Damn is one of this, like, it's a spicy call, but it is effective. So
yeah, I think I see a couple other lists, including Damn as well, that we were looking at. Let me see. Yeah, Comedian.
Yeah,
he includes it.
Yep. Yeah, that's how good it is. Comedian, one of, if not considered the greatest cEDH player in the modern era. So you can see just what kind of value it has there. There's one card here that we start to see as we move forward. It's Mnemonic Betrayal. And Flash, you have that one in front of
you? Yeah. Colorless, blue-white, sorcery, exile cards from your opponent's graveyards. You may cast those cards this turn, you pay, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any type to cast those spells at the beginning of the next end step. If any of those cards remain exiled, return them to their owner's graveyards, and then you exile Mnemonic Betrayal.
Yeah, this card's insane. And if you didn't know it, it's now $10, like, to get one.
Yeah, I mean, and this card in this deck kind of just, you're playing all the best cards. You're assuming your opponents are playing all the best cards. It's an additional copy of all your best cards. Same with Praetor's Grasp.
Yeah, it's a way to, like, reach into your opponent's resources and take what is best for you. And that's also what Lotho and what Ragavan and what Dockside gives you, is the access to all of the colors necessary. So, sorry, excuse me. The thing that you can even go grab a Finale of Devastation or whatever to go into your Dockside loop if you've generated some treasures off of Lotho. It's like, that's how valuable cards like this can be, is you can just snag, like, someone's graveyard, which, as we know, as Magic players, and as through the course of time has been proven, that your graveyard can act like a second hand. Even though, you might discard something or you might have used it already, knowing that it's in the graveyard, there is potential for it to resurface in some way. Doesn't matter what color it is. I think pretty much every color has the ability to reuse cards that are in the graveyard, whether it's through flashback or putting things back on top of the library, or stealing them from graveyards like Mnemonic Betrayal, which has become one of the most popular cards in cEDH, in Blue Farm, just because of that upside, where if the game does get into mid-range madness, like, this card helps you break that and just sort of, like, go out of control. So this list, again, updated about 10 months ago. So we're still seeing wheels. I think this is when wheels start to... this is about the same time or a little bit after Orcish Bowmasters drops, and players are trying to see that upside. They're trying to see the 21 damage from a Bowmaster. Like, they're trying to get that trigger to proc. So this is where we start to see them phase out. But they're, like... One thing I guess we didn't talk about in the last list is, yes, both of these lists have 29 instants. And this is where Blue Farm, like, separates itself, is that by having so much card draw and having so much interaction. Almost a third of the deck is built-in interaction. So it's having the ability to respond to situations appropriately, and then having the ability to press send when it's absolutely necessary at instant speed. That's what makes certain decks great, is having the ability to win on the stack. And this is no different. This is why it's one of the best decks. And Ad Naus, if you didn't know, Ad Nauseum is an instant. It is a 5-mana instant. And then you can also see that in some of these lists, Culling the Weak, Dark Ritual, like Rite of Flame, some of these cards just help you go into like Ad Naus that much easier. And Flash, you have Rite of Flame in front of you too, yeah?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. This is a card that's in every single list. Yeah, go ahead with Rite of Flame.
1 red sorcery, add 2 red to your mana pool, then red for each card named Rite of Flame in your graveyard.
Yeah, so regardless of whether or not you have, like, this is obviously a singleton format, so you can't have multiple. That just goes to show you how valuable a ritual that gains you 1 additional mana is in this deck. It's in every single list. This in combination with a free mana source, if you can generate black or generate something else, allows you. I mean, this is a 1 mana dockside, and most of the time, like that, I would imagine that's what it's for. It's still like one of those cards that when I talk to other players, they're like, do I cut it? Do I cut it in favor of like interaction or cut it in favor of like other things? And no. You just keep it in there. It's just that good. It helps you get to plays that you shouldn't be at this point in the game. It just pushes you forward just enough to get to where you need to be. All right. Any notes on this TK Deluxe deck that you want to talk about?
No. Nope.
Sweet deal. And as you can see, still has the Brain Freeze and Brain Freeze, Underworld Breach, consistent lines here exist as well. The next deck we are talking about is by Forcon. It's called Journey Before Destination. And this is a list that was updated about 2 weeks ago. And so we're seeing a more modern list that still contains a lot of the same cards, but this is the first list that we've seen, and I'm actually incredibly surprised by this because I've seen it in lists before. We have Serra Ascendant. You want to go ahead with Serra Ascendant whenever you're ready.
1 white, and it's going to be a 6/6 flying lifelink most of the time.
Yeah, so as long as you have 30 or more life, Serra Ascendant gets +5, and has flying. This is the reason why I'm surprised that it's just showing up now is because Tymna wants attackers, and life total matters with these. Whenever you're running Ad Nauseum, you are spending life to see cards. Like that's why, like in the first list, it had Peer into the Abyss. Peer into the Abyss has been moved out of the list because it zaps you for 7 when you reveal it off of an Ad Nauseum, which reduces the number of cards you're going to see pretty significantly. So Serra Ascendant allows you to basically turn 1 a 6/6 flying lifelink that in turn 2, you're going to go into Tymna, you're going to punch, you're going to draw a card and gain 5 life. So it's kind of insane. So since this was updated 2 weeks ago, we're actually starting to see creatures that have additional, like we know that creatures have to be good, like in order for them to be good enough, have to have additional value stapled to them. And there's a new card, Dauntless Dismantler, that is finally starting to make it into lists. It has a big enough booty. It's a 1/4 to where it can swing and likely not be killed. And is 1 damage. You can usually negotiate your way through so you can draw cards. But it also has attached to it an ability for XX and a white, sacrifice Dauntless Dismantler, This is an instant, or basically you can do this at any time. Destroy each artifact with mana value X. You're likely X is 0 pretty much every time. Like I don't think I've ever seen it X being 1 or X being 2 or anything more than that, because even as we roll down and we check out the artifact list here, I would say outside of 0, 2 is the most popular, but then you're maybe blasting an Arcane Signet or a Felwar Stone or maybe a Talisman.
I mean, this deck doesn't play a ton of the 2 mana rocks though.
Yeah, no, it usually shouldn't. Like, I think we saw Grim Monolith in some lists prior, but
yeah, I mean, some of the older lists I think have the talismans and stuff, but most of them are off it. I think Arcane Signet, Felwar Stone, and then maybe there's a flex slot for a third one, depending on what you're on, or for Grim Monolith or whatever. But yeah,
right, yeah, you would have to be seeing like multiple, like you'd have to be including multiple cards with multiple pips, like required. You have to be able to hit that color, where usually the only 2 cards that have multiple pips in all these lists is one, Ranger Captain, which is top 5 card in white in cEDH, maybe a top 5 card in cEDH, and then Grand Abolisher, which is an auto include if you're playing white. So the inclusion of like multiple talismans would just be almost exclusively to be able to hit those pips of mana, especially since Lotho also requires white or black. So Talisman of Progress here to give them blue and white. And then the one thing that this list is missing is it doesn't have the One Ring. Even though it was updated 2 weeks ago, this player feels like they get enough card draw out of the command zone that they don't need the One Ring to help spur them along.
Honestly, I mean, I understand that.
Yeah, like the enchantment. Oh, go ahead.
No. I'm just saying, like, there is enough redundancy of everything except for the protection effect in this deck that it doesn't necessarily need the One Ring. Right.
I mean, as we like even look at the enchantment package for all of these decks, it's usually between 3 and it's usually just 3 or 4 enchantments. This one has 5, which is an outlier, but it always includes 3 of them, which is Mystic Remora, Rhystic Study, and Underworld Breach. So it's like, yeah, there is card draw aplenty here in Blue Farm, and since those 3 are always in the list, this one is also running Necropotence, which probably satisfies the need for the One Ring. So like every one of these lists also includes Dark Ritual, being able to go crazy going into ad nauseam, but I'm sure that they've decided that Dark Ritual can also be an outlet just to hit a Necropotence and then just spend whatever 30 life to basically do the same exact thing as ad nauseam would have, and probably for a more efficient rate. So this player is, I feel like, going further into the mid-range, or at least leaning that way, especially since they also include Smothering Tithe. They're very much acknowledging that mid-range hell exists, and instead of playing Damn, they're playing Toxic Deluge. So, man, that's a tough include, Toxic Deluge, especially when you're trying to go into
on ad nauseam and Necro as well.
Yeah, that's a tough one. And I've seen a lot of players play Fire Covenant as well, which is very similar, just deals, you get to sort of like separate the damage and how much it does. So, dang. Yeah, this list, obviously, a lot of the stuff is very similar, but there are nuances based on the pilot and who is piloting this deck and how do they want to get there. That freedom is still allotted to a Blue Farm player, which is why you see so many decks entered and you see the conversion is still only 25%. You can't just give this deck to anybody. And it requires skill, and it requires timing and knowing, like reading the table, knowing when the right time to push send or press send is like, that's the difficulty of this deck. one card that still perseveres through all these lists, and as we move forward, we'll move right into Ian Flannery's list. Comedian, if you're unfamiliar. Final Fortune is just an auto-include, is what it feels like.
Take an extra turn.
2 mana. 2 mana, yeah. Do it. It's that good. So it's 2 red mana instant that if you take an extra turn, and then at the end of that turn, you lose the game. Well, that likely won't happen. Like, unless your opponents are holstering 2 or 3 pieces of removal or of interaction each, like, this gives you the ability to and have another combat phase, like see more cards, have another untap step, replenish your mana, you gather your resources. If you don't feel like you have enough, enough to get there this turn, or you do the math and you don't, Final Fortune allows you to basically reset your resources so that you do have enough to pursue it the following extra turn. You can also interrupt at any point in the turn cycle and say, like, oh, this person did this thing on your end step, I'm actually going to take the next turn. Like, this is where I decide to win. And that is the luxury of Final Fortune. That is why it's so good. It's why things like, I think it's like Warrior's Oath, like they've tried to print this card at sorcery speed. It just doesn't do the same thing. It goes to show you the difference between sorcery and instant, what makes a cut and what doesn't. And that's why sorcery counts in these decks is so low, like 7. I think we saw 5, so this one, Ian's list, is actually way lower on instants by 3, like from the previous one at 26, and way higher in creature count.
Well, yeah, it's also the first list we're seeing with Displacer Kitten Teferi.
Yeah, which is a combo line as well. So Teferi...
I mean, there's some interesting stuff that we're seeing at the first time in this deck, like Dolphy Voidwalker. We haven't seen that in other lists. I personally love that card. I think I could see not including it. Totally understand including it. Right. And then this list also has Talion, which I think is a new card from the other list that we looked at.
Right. Yeah. And this is about the same time. So this was updated 8 months ago. This is this is from Crimson Lion Games. Must be the venue that hosted the tournament that Comedian was playing in. But I remember this period in time of conversation with other players and just asking whether or not Talion was good enough. And I think the answer is yes. It is one of the best card draw engines outside of the One Ring, outside of Tymna, outside of Crom, that we've seen in a long time. And so, like, Talion coming in, making such a huge splash into Blue Farm. It's yes, it's 4 mana. But out of everything that we've shown you so far, I want you to look at the, average mana value of cards that we've talked about. It's usually 2. And even if you are like you usually name 2 Italian, because even if you drop a 1-drop, you play Ragavan. It has 2 power. Draw a card. Like, there's just little things like that add up over the course of time, or that Talion happens to encapsulate, that allows you to draw tons of cards. And not only that, it also drains your opponents of life. Whenever they cast something with that, they lose 2 life, and then you draw a card. So it battles against other Adnaz decks and basically makes it so that they can see less cards when they decide to fire that off. 3/4 flying as well. It's going to draw you cards as long as it and Tymna are on the battlefield together. I actually didn't even notice the Dolphy until you said something, and I think that like I was saying before, the creatures have to have some sort of additional value stapled to them. The best thing about Dolphy is that it can fire off an ad nause that was either discarded or cast previously if the person wasn't able to win the game, or if they fired off the ad nause and they decide to cast the first spell after ad nausing, you can just tap and sack the Dothy and then ad nause on top of that first spell.
Yeah. Also, it has Shadow for connecting with Tymna.
Yeah, huge benefit. I think maybe the only reason that I can think of that you wouldn't want to include it is that it's 2 black pips. You know, like it might be difficult to cast, but the upside, it being an asymmetrical stacks piece and exiling your opponent's cards, not your own, so it makes your Underworld Breach lines like remain active. And yeah, it can cast anything that's exiled with a void counter on it. So which is crazy. So if there's 2 Dothys, there's layers, which if you're unfamiliar is a very complex set of rules. But if there are 2 Dothys in turn order or whatever, that it'll get exiled under a certain Dothy, but it still has a void counter on it. And the way Dothy is worded is that choose an exile card an opponent owns with a void counter on it, you can play it. So if you...
anything that puts a void counter on it, including other Dothys, you can play it.
Exactly. So if you play a Dothy later, then like, let's say someone played a Dothy and they sacrificed it to go for something, all those cards that were still exiled still have void counters on them, so you can still play it with your Dothy later on. Like, so multiple Dothys in the pool is actually almost to your benefit. I love Dothy and Teom, obviously, great card in there. But in this list, it does seem to shine more just because of, what Tymna says. You're going to be able to draw additional cards off this. So, like you said earlier, Archivist of Ogma also making an appearance. Additional card draw. I don't know a time or a game I've been in where players haven't searched their library, and this also gains you life. So it definitely takes the next step up. This is also like that time and era where Phyrexian Metamorph becomes more valuable than things like Phantasmal Image, where this and the reason for that is just because it can copy a 1 ring, so it can help reset a 1 ring.
And this deck is sans 1 ring, I believe, of its own.
Yeah, guys. It is so popular, and there's so many 1 rings out there that you could probably reliably run a Phyrexian Metamorph and still have access to the 1 ring. So it's pretty nuts. It's a great include, and it also just helps reinforce other strategies. Like it can enter as a copy of a Ranger Captain to continue generating value and also give you that sacrifice ability. So, or additional card draw off of an Ogma or something. It really depends on what you see at the board state, because it can also copy something your opponents control, like a Drannith Magistrate to keep them off their commanders. As we look down the list, like we said, Ian is one of the best to ever do it. High praise. This list is definitely something to be studied, but we'll get down to the enchantments, and there's one actually spicy include here. It is Touch the Spirit Realm, which last summer I remember putting this in my decks, and then I started to see it everywhere. It's a great card. I mean, Channel is a powerful ability. Yeah,
and you can't really dedicate a slot in a 4-color deck to Boseiju. So
right.
I think it's a great include.
Yeah, and it deals with, so like once Otawara hit the scene as an auto include, anything that's running blue, and now that you see, it's strange how strong white has gotten, because you need pretty much there are certain cards that are just auto includes if you're in white: Drannith, Abolisher, Ranger Captain, and now I think you can almost put this in the same tier, Touch the Spirit Realm. And maybe that's a lofty statement, but the thing that it does, that, like you said, Channel being such a powerful ability that you can't, like when Grand Abolisher hits the battlefield on the opponent's board, you're locked out. unless you have Otawara or unless you have Touch the Spirit Realm. And like Grand Abolisher is such a popular line that Touch the Spirit Realm does so much. It allows you to lift the Abolisher off so you can interact. When your opponent thinks that they're absolutely safe and going for the win, that's when they're at their most vulnerable. If you're able to channel this, if you're able to channel an Otawara, then you can interact and just upend their strategy completely. So having that upside, pretty good. Pretty damn good. Again, we see Grim Monolith here as well. But yeah, Ian, really great player. And this seems like a very consistent list. And also we talked about like Teferi being like a outlet for like Displacer Kitten. There's a combo there where you can just continuously bounce and draw cards. But Teferi also acts as a secondary Grand Abolisher, since your opponents can't cast spells like during your turn. So, or they can only cast spells at any time they could cast a sorcery. So pretty rad stuff. Absolutely love the list. It's very consistent. This feels like the one that if you're trying to test Blue Farm for yourself, I would start here and then I would go make adjustments to like have it more personalized to what you want to do. So our last list of the day, which is the most unique Blue Farm list I think I've ever seen. This is called War Room Diamond. Last updated about 11 days ago. It's by Outlaw 9401. This list won a tournament recently. So
okay.
Yeah, there are very few, and the thing is that even though Blue Farm has a lot of representation in the top 16s, like it should have this many first place. Like if you're on screen with us on YouTube, it should have this many first place like results. But if you go to other decks, I think that their conversion rate actually translates to more wins at getting first than it does 2s and 3s, which Blue Farm has a lot of, you know? So it has a hard time getting there, but Blue Farm is something that is just incredibly consistent in netting top 16 entries. So this list, being as creative as it is, it's great to see it make the jump and get the dub at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's got a bunch of newer inclusions too.
Yeah,
like not like it's new stuff. Plus, there's some choices being made. So like the new stuff is Delny, Flesh Duplicate, Tashana's Tidebinder. Talion's in there, but we already saw that. Mm-hmm. Stern Scolding is in there. Are they on Born Upon a Wind? I think
they are indeed.
Yeah. So I mean, that's the newer stuff in this deck. But the One Ring, of course. There's also some interesting choices. Like I just spotted another one that I didn't notice before. Rending Volley. Yeah. Are you familiar with this card?
I was just hovering over it with the mouse because I was like, "What is this?" Yeah, go ahead. What is it?
One red instant, Rending Volley can't be countered by spells or abilities. Rending Volley deals 4 damage to target white or blue creature.
You're right. There are a lot of choices being made here because
there's that card. There's Sidisi's Faithful.
Yeah.
1 blue exploit. When Sidisi's Faithful exploits a creature, return target creature to its owner's hand. Mm-hmm. Like that's a choice. That is not a new card. That is from Cons, it looks like.
Yeah. Yep. It's a common. It's like something that I doubt anybody would like. This is clearly like this is a creature-based strategy. This is something where you can see that they also have, like you talked about, Flesh Duplicate. They have Phantasmal Image here. This runs.
They're also on Phyrexian Metamorph. They have multiple effects.
Yeah, they want the copies.
Yeah, we've said redundancy a lot in other contexts. Now we're seeing a redundancy with the copy effects.
Totally. And when you can play your opponent's decks, like you are oftentimes like magnifying the effect because you shouldn't be playing it, they should be playing it. So it oftentimes actually is more impactful. So like that's what like Atali. That's why Atali has been so popular, because it literally plays your opponent's decks. All you have to do is get to Atali, and it just plays everything else. So like this, like all these copy effects, whether it's, to instant speed, copy something or whatever, like Grand Abolisher, getting a second version of that to like protect, like we talked about Otawara and Touch of Spirit Realm. But mostly what you go for here is Dockside, I would imagine, just to like generate it like so much mana and generate so much advantage so you can keep rolling with the punches and keep this ball turning. So another card that I think was definitely a choice, like, yes, Rending Volley is like, you are assuming that at the top tables you are going to see Sisay, or you are going to see this doesn't even kill Kenrith, this kills Krom. If you guys out there listening know what else this kills, please leave it in the comments, because in order for it to be included into a list that can, get the dub place first, it has to have like enough consistency and like seeing targets. So I'm curious, obviously.
I mean, it kills other Timnas, kills other Kroms.
True. You really scratch your head. It's
yeah. Well, I'm trying to think of high value targets,
right?
Because it's like a lot of the things you see in CEDH are like ETB. Like once they're on the board, like if they're entering the battlefield, you're already done. You're already dead. It's like there's not a lot of value in just like I'm thinking about like, well, what commanders do you want to take away?
This kills Kinnan, which is important. I just thought about that.
Okay.
Let's see. When we go through like the top like lists of commanders that have like hit certain conversions.
I don't know. It's just super interesting. I would like to know more about why Rending Volley. Let me actually maybe see when that card. It's probably not in the recent history. Oh, Rending Volley was added a month ago.
So it's a pretty recent inclusion. They have determined that what they are seeing in their meta has like proven it to have enough value. So,
and in fact, from the recent history, let's go to full history. All right. It looks like Rending Volley, Sidisi's Faithful, and Delny all went in about the same time that a Ledger Shredder and Containment Priest were taken out. And Cyclonic Rift.
That. Yeah, I think.
And then more recently, they took out Boromir, Warden of the Tower, for Professional Facebreaker.
Yeah, those are all interesting. Like, and the
is this deck not on Cyclonic Rift?
It is
right now.
It is. I just saw it go back. It's in there. And I had to double check the other lists just to make sure that Cyclonic Rift was in all of those as well, because it is the best. Like, it is a board wipe, right?
Yeah.
And it's the best.
So there's some thought process there that we can see, like, for these interesting things. Yeah, that's weird. So they added Rending Volley and Sidisi's Faithful in the same time frame, taking out Containment Priest and Ledger Shredder, essentially.
Yeah, and I can see those swaps where like Ledger Shredder on Impact, like when it first entered the scene, was seen as additional, like it was almost a turbo staple because it saw so many additional cards in every single turn cycle. But we've now seen the One Ring, and we've now seen other cards that can help, like with card draw, like Talion. I think Talion is just the better version of Ledger Shredder. Even though it's 2 more mana, it does like
it's just so much more unconditional.
Yes, the investment allows you to draw multiple cards in a single turn rather than like if Talion comes down, it actually prevents a lot of like decks that include green and red to go through their Saber like Team or Sabertooth lines with Dockside. So, like you name 2, you're going to kill yourself off of going for infinite mana. like type thing, or it also stops a lot of food chain stuff. So I definitely see like why Talion takes that jump and is like, hey, this includes and stops a lot of decks that I had trouble with before, like Rocco. Like it stops, you know, like you can name one probably with Rocco and then kill your opponent off of that, like just that. So another card that's like sort of a spicy include, which is just like very much on the nose. They're being cheeky with this one. It's Spell Snare, which I haven't seen in a list in such a long time, but it's 1 blue mana instant, counter target spell with converted mana cost 2. That's all it hits. Stops Brain Freeze. You know, or like it at least stops the first cast of Brain Freeze. It stops Cyclonic Rift Overloaded. It stops a Final Fortune. It stops a Tainted Pact. It stops a Thassa's Oracle. It stops a Dockside Extortionist. It stops a Draneth Magistrate. It stops a Grand Abolisher. It stops...
It hits a lot of things that you want to stop.
Yeah. It's, you know, like, and you look at it and you're like, wow, that is incredibly limited scope of, you know, power, but it's not. Like, and that's why you name 2 Italian. Like, this is like, it's clever. And it is, and this person is rewarded for how clever they are by including it, because they're just like, yeah, I see a lot of 2 mana stuff. You know, it's like, I would rather have that than they're running that over Swan Song even. So it's like,
yeah, yep.
Like they have the inside track. They know. And as we roll down to like the artifacts, it's like the one include here that we didn't see in other lists, Cursed Totem. I don't know if you've ever played against a Cursed Totem. that shit sucks.
Yeah, it's irritating. It's an irritating card.
Yeah, it's a really great stack speeds. And again, in the enchantments, we're seeing the same 3 that have to exist here, I feel like. Rhystic Study, probably the best, just the best overall card draw engine in the game. Mystic Remora, Honorable Breach, and then the inclusion of Smothering Tithe. So we see this person wanting to get to the mid game, using all of their instants to sort of control the happenings at the table, and then drawing enough. It's so crazy, Delny, to make this list, but God, is like, it was spec'd hard. I think people really, really, really like Delny, and to see it actually make it into a list that can win a tournament is like, I wonder how often they tutor for it, you know? Like that, it makes me very curious. But earlier we saw, God, what was that card? Grim Hireling make the list. And now Professional Facebreaker. Menace, to get through to players, earn that treasure. And you're probably getting 3 treasures because you're probably making contact with all 3 players, drawing 3 cards, losing 3 life, whatever. Creating 3 treasures.
It's also card advantage because it has that third ability: sack a treasure, exile the top card of your library. You play that card your turn.
Yeah,
this turn.
Yeah, in tandem with Dockside copies, you know, like like you're actually drawing cards off Dockside instead of, you know, like that in tandem with this. I can see how seamless like if you're piloting this correctly, how seamless this can move. It's very fluid. They are playing Teferi as an extra copy of Grand Abolisher, but no Displacer Kitten. Probably favoring the Tishana's Tidebinder to be more interactive, to take things away from your opponent. So Blue Farm is an incredibly like interesting case study of cEDH. And because it is the deck that has the highest number of conversions, but a very, very similar conversion rate, it is still one of those decks that requires a high skill cap. And I hope that today, what we were able to do for you is give you a good idea of like the flexibility, but also how rock solid this strategy is, how flexible it is, but also how consistent it is, right? Like, I think we named at least 6 cards or plus that exist in every single list, not even going through like the suite of interaction, because every one of these lists has a Pact, a Chain of Vapor, a Flusterstorm, a Mental Misstep.
Yeah. Well, I think it's mostly a solved list. Like there's maybe 5 flex slots, something like that, 5, 6.
Mm-hmm. And like these like outliers are like that sort of like warp that and say like, hey, I have 10 flex spots. Like they're sacrificing something that the deck like like wants to do in order to like have their own spin on it. So like you said, it's solved. I think that like a lot of players feel that way, and like I think the results show that is that it is a solved strategy where as more cards come out, like this deck only gets better. As we see creature cards do more for less, as we see tutors that, you know, like do more for less or provide additional flexibility, like, you know, like Spree being one of the more recent mechanics. We didn't see any of those cards today, but it's only a matter of time until one of them becomes good enough to be able to make the cut. Or some of the new cards from Modern Horizons 3. We haven't seen any of those yet, but there's still so much to be tested here, like Rending Volley, you know? So, Blue Farm, a deck, consistent and timeless, and you can always expect to see at least, probably, if you're playing a 64-player tournament, you're probably going to see 10 of them, like, at least. So, Flash, any final thoughts on Blue Farm?
No, it's a bunch of good cards. You can, you still need to be a skilled pilot, but it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, it's not as easy as picking 7 up and, you know, like picking up 7 cards and winning the game, you know. So
no, that's a different deck. That's Najeela.
Yes, I've done that. I've done that with Najeela, which we'll talk about soon. But let's I'm pretty tapped out on this. Let's get the heck out of here. And
cool.
One thing that we haven't that I didn't talk about today, but do
we have to talk about any promos or contests or anything?
We do. Okay. We have a giveaway that happens bi-weekly here on the show. This week's giveaway, if you are a patron, an official Pepperhead, you're going to get 1 free giveaway into this, into every single bi-weekly giveaway. And if you are a Cherry Vanilla Pepperhead, like UWP Quirt, K Mr. K, and Will Rule, you'll get 2 free entries into these. And this week's giveaway is a set of MoxStars tokens, and you're going to get a copy of Haragast, Erupting Nullkite, which is valued at about $15 right now, plus the set of tokens reaches our patron donations. So if you would like to enter for free, all you got to do is go on YouTube and leave a comment with your favorite token that we have, that we've produced by Death Milk Designs. If you want a closer look at what these tokens look like, you can find them on our Discord server, which you can join through the link in the description below, or you can find an image of these tokens on our Instagram page, which you can follow us and stay tuned as we, you know, post all the funny Dr. Pepper memes that we can possibly find. And that is this week's bi-weekly giveaway. If you would like to support the show, and you've made it this far in the show and you haven't subscribed, you should probably do that, because we're pretty rad. We're actually the Naughty Boys of Cardboard. That is an official title.
There it is.
It's
this late in the app.
Yeah.
We're dropping it.
Well, I think it was conveyed pretty
Okay, yeah,
heavily.
no, definitely that was the vibe that we had, that we were the Naughty Boys of Cardboard.
Oh, yeah. I won't say it like that, but oh, yeah. You can like, subscribe, and hit that bell for more notifications. Like I said about the Discord server, we have a growing community on there, having conversations pretty often about like deck lists, brew buddies, that part of the channel. And then you can also find us on all major podcasting platforms. You can also support us directly via Patreon by becoming an official Pepperhead or by becoming a Cherry Vanilla Pepperhead. So official Pepperhead, $3 a month, Cherry Vanilla, $5 a month. Thank you to everyone who has supported the show so far, even if it's just by listening or even if it's just by subscribing. We're hoping to do more of these like deck list breakdowns, cEDH deck list breakdowns, and talk about the commanders that have like converted, that have gotten there, to give you greater insight as a listener into how these things work, so that you can prepare yourself for tournaments and know how these decks function when you sit across from them. Or if you want to play them, that is also an option. That being said, let's get out of here. Thank you so much for listening. This has been the MoxStars Podcast. Peace.
Peace.